This lecture was recorded, was originally given in Montreal in this event, If You Have to Ask, organized by McGill University. And I'm doing a version of it to the web because I thought it was very well received by a very special community of scientists, artists, professors that are, some of them are Lawrence Kiermaier, Jasmine Guzda, Randy Fertel, Stefan Nachmanovich, all the names that are written in this beautiful sign. So, we're going to talk about the idea of an art of healing and how that was proposed by Dr. Nise da Silveira, who was a woman psychiatrist in Brazil, that I will detail more her work. And she is a very important character of Brazilian and world psychiatry, since she developed a very interesting method, effective method to work with health, mental health, and mental health promotion. So we go on and into this idea that madness, yet there is method in it. Folie, c'est là ne manque pas de méthode, which is a quotation from Hamlet, from Shakespeare, and indeed that is a revelation. There is method in madness, and that's what we pretend we want to demonstrate today. Well, all starts with Descartes, isn't it? So René Descartes, Renatus Cartesius, was a physicist, a mathematician, a French mathematician, who was a Jesuit, was a priest that was expelled after he started developing his ideas. And he was persecuted throughout all Europe. And he's a revolutionary and of great importance in Western thinking. He is considered to be the midwife of scientific revolution. He was one of the first researchers and scientists, modern scientists, to propose the idea of a scientific method, a method of approaching nature, a method of describing nature, a method of saying how nature is organized. And he, being a mathematician, he would propose that nature would behave as a machine. Nature, it would behave as a machine, and this machine could be approached through mathematics. With mathematics, you can calculate the movements of the machines. You can describe the relationships between the pieces of the machine, the causes and the effects that are involved in that phenomena, that system that you are trying to explain. So he would say that the body is a machine, and he would say that this machine was devoid of affections, of emotions, of subjectivities, that it should be approached in a reductionist manner. That means to dissecate the parts, to make it as simple as possible in order to describe it. And he would say that the emotions, the spiritual plane, the subjectivities, the affections would be in a separate plane, and that we should not pay attention to that. This produced a huge developments in Western in the last 400 years of the West. And it's been generating all sorts of gadgets and machines and devices and computers and cameras and all kinds of airplanes, atomic bombs. We are plenty of machines. We have machines throughout all areas of human existence. And however, one question remains: emotions. How emotions can be described? It is seen that emotions are very important in our human life, that emotions govern our existence. However, in this Cartesian world, emotions are left aside, as if it was possible. So we deny any kind of subjective aspect of our existence, and we propose that we have machines, and we should treat them as machines, and we should manage them as machines, and we should do public policies for machines. If it works for the machines, it would work for everybody. And that's not true. One of the first critics of this vision, of this mechanical reductionist vision that has ruled the Western society in the last 500, 400 years, was this figure, this character, Baruch de Spinoza, a great philosopher and scientist, an early scientist, the lost father of biology. Contemporary philosophers of biology point to Spinoza as one of the pioneers of biological thinking in our tradition. And he was a Portuguese Jew born in Amsterdam. His family was fleeing from Spanish Inquisition. He was a refugee. He was an immigrant. He lost the origins of his of his family, and he found a favorable environment in the Jewish community of Amsterdam, who was tolerated by the Dutch Republic, and found in Holland, found in Netherlands, a very favorable environment. Spinoza received an excellent education, and he could perform a new synthesis for science and for human ethics. He wrote this most important book of his work, The Ethics, that was published in 1677 upon his death. And the vision that Spinoza has, it's a very, actually, very widespread vision in culture, in mystic traditions, in different cultures of Earth, different parts of originarian cultures. And he had this understanding that we have this self-generating behavior, isn't it? This self-constructing behavior. He called that conatus, the tendency to self-maintain, the tendency to self-preserve. And this is what distinguishes this matter we are formed of. This idea of immanence, of continuity, of we are connected to each other, we are connected to the other, we are connected to the world, we are ecosystems, we are continuous relationships. There is no separation amongst the living matter. All that is living is networkish related. We are circles inside of circles with no ending and no beginnings. Even in the most elementary level, in the most tiny cell, in the most tiny bacteria, the amount of complexity of the relationships is so immense, and we must develop a mode of thinking to deal with that. Even in the lowest, in the molecular levels, we cannot separate molecules, we cannot separate cells, we cannot separate tissues, we cannot separate organisms, we cannot separate individuals, societies, ecosystems, biosphere. all that is living is connected in the same cycling, in the same idea. And this has a fundamental origin in our biological history, which is around 3.5 to 4 billion years ago, when those self-maintaining systems, self-constructing systems, these cycles of permanent regeneration and renovation that characterize living matter, has a very profound origin, which is this Krebs cycle, which is a cycle of sugars and different molecules and acids and different biochemical molecules that actually compose a cycle. And so there is no end and no beginning. And it is through this kind of cycling that energy is produced. And that's how the cells produce energy for their works and their maintenances and developments. That Krebs cycle, he occurs inside the mitochondria, which is a bacteria that have been incorporated into our cells very long ago, around that time, 3 billion years ago. And this fundamental feature is what we call autopoiesis, the cellular relationships that self-sustain and self-maintain themselves. And that's a very interesting mode to think, this idea of cycles and circularities. That's the whole idea that oriented the field of cybernetics, that were trying to understand how biological systems and machines could regulate themselves. And this is a tendency in our thinking. So if we understand that we are a cycle inside a cycle, and we are determined by our own structure, we'll understand that external stimuli, when they affect our organization and change our organization, they do that because they have similar structures inside the system. So we can be affected only by what we have inside of us. We can recognize outside only what we know from the inside. That's how our systemic organization is producing the kind of phenomena we are trying to study when we are studying psychiatry, we are studying psychology, we are studying medicine, when we're studying biology in general. Biological systems are self-structured systems. That's why they behave in a networkish, circular way, and we should approach like this. Normal medicine is working with impositions on the systems, like drugs, electroshocks, and attacks, violent attacks, even physical violence sometimes in psychiatry, that you impose to the system something that he does not connect, that he doesn't recognize. So he would have to produce a response against this. That's not how biological systems operate. Biological systems work through the self-connectivity and the maintenance of this connectivity. The neurobiologist, the Chilean neurobiologist Humberto Maturana, has been of key importance in the last 40 years in advancing these ideas and these visions when he started working with neurobiological systems and observed this circularity, observed this self-connectivity. And he soon observed that self-connectivity could be observed as a general principle in biology. And that's why he developed this idea of autopoiesis, this idea that we are autopoietic systems that are generating ourselves and also generating the environment that we live in. It's a self-construction. Poiesis comes from the Greek creation. So autopoiesis is self-creation. And the body of knowledge that Maturana has produced, Maturana and the collaborators and our own group, that developed immunology theories about this under Professor Nelson Vaz in Brazil. But they called biology of knowledge and language, because Maturana very soon observed that we human beings were capable of observing nature. We are part of nature, and we also describe nature. We create descriptions of nature, its diversity, and be understanding that this networkish, systemic, historic behavior of biology, that we are historical systems that are developing this self-maintenance mechanisms and self-preservation mechanisms with the generation of variations and the conservation of very important autopoietic mechanisms, conservative mechanisms in our biology that we should observe. This led Maturana to develop a whole new mode of understanding biology. He soon understood that if we are really going to consider in a serious manner this idea that we are self-connected, that we are networkishly connected, that we are circles inside circles, that we are cycles inside of cycles, that there is no actual separation between individuals. That's a human description. Everything that is said by an observer, everything that is said by an observer that can be himself. That's one of Maturana axioms, when he places the observer as a key factor in describing biology, and also understanding the autopoietic molecular mechanisms. We can see that many of the biological descriptions and medical descriptions actually have nothing to do with biological structure, are human inventions that we are imposing on nature and generating real distortions, and we are burning the country, we are burning the planet, and we are burning the populations, the poor populations, because we don't have a proper mode of describing the systemic relationships between humans and animals, nature and society, rich and poor, black and white. We keep describing biology and nature as isolated elements, and that's not the biology that Spinoza has proposed, that Maturana is contemporarily proposing. The central axis that biological revolution we are living in, of the biological revolution we are living in, is the theory of evolution, is the theory of how biological species originated and differentiated in such a diverse universe of human and animal and plants and bacteria and fungi and protozoa that have appeared on Earth. The key change that Maturana proposes is the idea of or origin of the species by means of natural drift. He says, like boats adrift, we are species adrift that are networkish related. We are evolving all together. We are co-evolving. There is no individual evolution. All evolution occurs along with the environment, along with the other species. We cannot speak evolution. We have to say co-evolution. And how that works, it must be explained by a new theory that Maturana and Jacques Pordeus has published in 1992, called The Origin of the Species by Natural Drifts. And that, for us, configures a scientific revolution, a paradigmatic shift in biology. We know that when the evolution theory changes, everything else changes. Medicine changes, the other fields of biology change, immunology, bacteriology, all of the other parts, zoology, they change because biology is validated by evolutionary theory, and evolutionary theory is validated, confirmed by biology, by biological descriptions. So when you change evolutionary understanding, you are changing the central axis of biological work. With this new understanding of co-evolution and we are evolving with the environment, we can have a closer look at the evolution of our species, the human story, isn't it? The hominid evolution that started like 7 million, 3 million, 3.3 million years ago, and then the first hominids started to appear and evolved until we reached 200,000 years ago with the present human, the Homo sapiens. And this history of evolution, it's very important to understand our psychic activity, our mental health. It's very important for developing a therapeutic practice in psychiatry. It's very important that we have a proper understanding, a solid scientific view about the history of humankind, about the history of our ancestors, about the history of those who lived before us and have accumulated a lot of teachings in our culture, in our understandings, in our concepts, in our music, in our dances, to transmit knowledge and preparedness to survive in the environment that was so hostile for us in those last 3 million years, and how that species evolved with this cultural nature, with this languaging nature, as Maturana points. We are languaging animals. We were invented by language. Language differed us from the rest of the hominids. With the development of, and we don't know when it started. It may have started 3 million years ago with the very elementary rituals and first mimics and dances and sitting around the fire and developing groups, collectivities. We were always in groups. We were working as groups. We were led by the females. We developed this sensual mode of living together and having pleasure in company and communication and celebration. So we seated around the fire, we started to mime, and then we started to tell stories. We started to elaborate myths about nature, myths about the skies, and we started to develop religions, we started to develop institutions, and then it ended up as we are now, destroying the planet and dreaming we are God, that we can control nature. But in our deep nature, we are loving monkeys. We are communicating, collective monkeys. Our sexuality is a collective sexuality, it's a bisexual collective sexuality, neither gay, neither straight. We are collective and bisexual. We work in groups. We depend on the collectivity. We are gregarious creatures. We depend on solidarity. We depend on humanness, on kindness. Without that, existence would be unbearable. We are founded by love. Love is the founding existence of humankind. That's what unites us all. That's what makes us thrive. That's what makes us fight for peace. That's why we want to make a better place to live, with justice, with sustainability. And I believe that this was constructed throughout those millions of years of evolution exactly with these feelings of love, of playing, of being together, of encountering the collectivity, of being organized in collectives, families, and all those very human and natural. The cultural variations we have produced are enormous. We have all kinds of disgraces and all kinds of genius. And Charlie Chaplin is always an example because he was a child of a schizophrenic mother. He lived in the streets. He was grown up in shelters, and that was not enough to let him down and make him ill. In the opposite, he was able to transform creatively all this suffering into a work that is a human patrimony in all senses. So we are in this moment, we are in this crossroads. We are in the Man in the Crossroads, this beautiful mural by Diego Rivera, where we can think about our destiny, what we did, and what we are doing until now. Who we are, what we are doing, what is the role of language, what is the role of thinking, what's the role of developing ideas, models, understandings, and understanding about nature. So biology is a cycle, is a dance. Everything that is alive is dancing, and that's why Maturana says that to live is a process of understanding. To live is to learn, and to learn is to live. The very mode of our existence proposes this idea for us. We are biologically connected to ourselves, to the other, to the whole system, to the whole of nature, and we describe it in certain ways. So all descriptions have an observer, have a starting point as the observation and the description. So we have this total power with our language. We can create everything. We can name everything. And we, in Brazil, in the last 7 years working in the public health office of Rio, where I started this Center for Culture, Science and Health that has been terminated just 2016 by the corrupt administration of the Brazilian and Rio de Janeiro politics. But we have produced a very significant experience with those principles, with those ideas, and we called it in 2011 with the first Congress of the People's University for Art and Science, which was a collaborative movement we started, the knowing in every being, o saber em todo ser, the knowing in every being. The human living is a process of learning, and learning is a process of living. So we learn all the time. And the main reference for our work in that territory of Rio de Janeiro was Dr. Nise da Silveira, a woman psychiatrist that did a revolutionary work with a very sophisticated and very scientific psychiatry that she developed by her own initially in a huge colony hospital, the Engenho de Dentro Hospital, which was a centennial colony hospital, decrepit colony hospital that has been 80% deactivated, but we still have a large population of chronic psychotic people abandoned in very bad clinical conditions, and that was more or less the same conditions that Dr. Nise da Silveira worked in the beginning in the 40s when she encountered this hospital fully activated with 2,000 schizophrenics incarcerated inside of it, being treated with lobotomies, insulinic comas, and electroshocks. And she refused. She said no to those brutal, aggressive treatments, and she started developing. She was assumed the session of therapeutic occupational therapies, and she developed a series of ateliers and workshops and many, many different activities. Serendipitously, she found in the spontaneous expression of the chronic psychotic schizophrenic patients with long-term incarceration in the public hospice, in the public psychiatric hospital of the suburb of Rio de Janeiro, she found structured symbols in that production. She found mythological symbols in the paintings of the patients, and that impressed her very much. How could people considered to be brute, considered to be dangerous, being able to exteriorize, to paint very fine and sophisticated symbols that could be seen in other parts of human culture? This made her encounter many different artists. Fernando Diniz, Adelina Gomes, Carlos Pertuz, Emílio de Barros, Rafael Domingues. It's a long list of artists that she revealed and she worked in the ateliers, in the therapeutic ateliers that she started in 1946 in Rio de Janeiro, which when nobody was thinking about this, when very few people were thinking about this. Actually, in Brazil, this has been preceded by Dr. Osório Taumaturgo Cesar in the Juqueri Hospital in São Paulo. Taumaturgo Cesar was the pioneer in the arts and psychiatry in Brazil. He had worked with Mário de Andrade, Oswald de Andrade, Tarsila do Amaral, and many others, Flávio de Carvalho, and many other artists, very important artists from the beginning of the 20th century in São Paulo. And he started this pioneer experience. He corresponded with Freud himself and pioneered this experience with art and psychiatry, and there's still a museum dedicated to this work that was developed by Osório Cesar. Nise da Silveira, she developed a whole theory about this. The abstract language creates itself at every instant due to the impulse of forces waving from the unconscious. It was an empirical finding. Worringer already had brought me decisive explanations when I suffered in useless searches in the psychiatrist's books. Later on, the encounter with Kandinsky brought me data even more important for the understanding of numerous abstract paintings arisen in our atelier. It seems to me that these paintings are very close to what Kandinsky denominated improvisation. The experimental finding found resonance in the conception of a great master of art theory. That is from the book of Nise da Silveira, 1997. And I think that is a key aspect of this approach, of this method, which is improvisation, which is the proper liberation of internal contents without a coercive environment, without direction, with letting the people to do what they feel, what they should do, allowing themselves to express themselves. And that's what Kandinsky talks about. Expressions, in great part unconscious and suddenly formed, originated in interior happenings, therefore impressions of the inner nature. I call them improvisations. So very few people observe this key aspect of the work of Nise da Silveira. She allowed people to improvisate, and she developed a whole environment that was thought about preparing this. This was so profitable that she founded in the last 70 years the Museum of Images of the Unconscious, which is the whole collections, long series of works of every patient, and incredible therapeutic work through the expression of archetypical images. And it's a method, it has a whole set of scientific explanations, mechanisms. She proposes the mechanisms of catalyzing affection, which is this improvisatory, dialogic kind of affection that you allow the person to communicate and to express, and you reinforce his tendencies, his ideas, his talents. And this has produced the Museum of Images of the Unconscious, which is actually the largest museum for art and psychiatry in the world. Today it counts with 350,000 pieces of works of art produced by mental patients with long-term incarceration. And it's a very important work that has formed a lot of people in Brazil and has formed our own experience and our own vision about mental health and how we can construct a mental health policy through culture and through artistic creativity, community work, and letting people express themselves and supporting them to express. All this happened because Nise says that she was able, in the very early beginning, to make photographs of those paintings of the patients and send it to Professor Carl Jung in Zurich, who was one of the greatest psychiatrists of our time. And he received her in Zurich. They worked together, and she was able to work with the whole extensive, very large scientific work of Professor Jung. He really did a very extensive work covering a huge area of knowledge, and starting with psychiatry and developing a whole theoretical idea about the human psyche and Jungian psychology that has formed so many important people in the whole world. When Nise da Silveira met him in his office, he would ask her, "Do you study mythology, my dear?" She said, "Mythology? Why should I? And if you don't study mythology, you will never understand the paintings and the delirium that your patients bring to you." And that was the precious hint that he gave to her. And then she returned to Brazil and constructed the Museum of Images of the Unconscious, where she could verify the occurrence, the spontaneous occurrence of those symbols, eternal symbols, archetypical symbols, symbols that appear in many different cultures, that appear in the arts, that appear in the cultural expressions of people, that appear in the mental conditions, that appear in psychosis, that appear in the dreams, that those images, those forms, those contents that are conserved from generation to generation are what Jung called archetypes. And that has a central role in human life. We are guided by those archetypes. Those archetypes are installed in our culture, in the rites, in the habits, in our understandings, in our concepts, in our visions, in the images that we produce, in the images that we create and we recreate. And in Nise da Silveira's work, she would use Spinoza's concept that images are the collection of affections. So if we can change the collections of affections, if we can change images, if we can reformulate, re-express, re-signify images, we are actually re-signifying human emotions, human affections. And this was very interestingly explored by this Brazilian artist in parallel with Dr. Nise da Silveira, who was Lygia Clark. Lygia Clark was a painter from Minas Gerais, and she understood this idea that images are relationships, that images are emotions. So at some point of her career, she declared there is no art object, but relational objects. And she developed a series of works devoted to relationship, to establishing relationships, to developing new modes of relationships amongst people, between people, and how should they be connected. She developed a whole way of changing relationship to the environment, to the group, to the person. And she culminated with this idea that she named structuring the self, that was the mediation of internal sensations, of internal contents through the relational objects, through sensations, through feelings, through interchanges. And that was a very rich and powerful strategy that was developed in the last 28 years inside the psychiatric hospital, the same psychiatric hospital I worked and Dr. Nise da Silveira worked. Dr. Lula Wanderley, who is Luiz Carlos Wanderley, Lula Wanderley is a great psychiatrist who worked with Nise da Silveira, and also he worked with with Lygia Clark. He wrote this book that means The Dragon Landed in the Space, Contemporary Art, Psychic Suffering, and the Relational Object of Lygia Clark. Lula developed a whole therapeutic approach with this idea of relational objects. It's been 28 years of experience. He's a great master, and he is one of the patrimonies of world psychiatry in the field of art and cultural psychiatry that should be more promoted and more advertised in public policies in medicine, in order to develop more effective health promotion and more effective therapeutic and diagnostic methods. Another example of successful psychiatry that I encountered in this trajectory was Professor Jacques Arpin. It is Professor Jacques Arpin, who lives in Zurich, in Geneva, in Switzerland, and he develops a very prolific work in the last 30 years with theater and psychiatry. His wife, Monica, is also a collaborator of this work. She's an anthropologist. She's Brazilian. They speak Portuguese. Jacques has worked in Bahia, has worked in Candomblé. He's a very interesting researcher and scientist of psychiatry, of cultural psychiatry. In Geneva, he has a small theater where he coordinates and performs with the patients with works with transcultural populations. Has a beautiful work published called The Masters of Their Conditions, published in the journal Transcultural Psychiatry, and he develops a whole theory about anthropology of theater and anthropology of psychiatry. He has worked with Eugenio Barba, who is a great theater director in Denmark. And in the second floor of the theater, he has a private office consultation where he receives the psychiatric patients, and when they are ready, they go down to the theater. This is our key references for our experience in Rio de Janeiro, in the Madness Hotel, in the DyoNises Theatre, and Shakespeare. We found also the work of Professor Murray Cox, who played and workshopped Shakespeare in the Broadmoor Hospital, which is the psychiatric criminal hospital in London, and he was able to develop exceptional results in therapy, and also wrote two beautiful books. One was this, The Shakespeare as a Prompter of the Therapeutic Process. So he proposes in this book that poetry and theater are prompters of the therapeutic process. And this is a wonderful contribution to psychiatry and theater studies when he shows that many psychopaths, killers, murderers, rapers they would identify and dialogue and engage in therapeutic process out of Shakespearean characters like Richard III, like King Claudius. Shakespeare is full of shadows and murders and rapes. It's a very interesting approach to severe mental illness that Shakespeare indeed must have known. The second book of Murray Cox is Shakespeare Come to Broadmoor, and this is a beautiful book also written by the cast that played Shakespeare, by the Royal Shakespeare Company that collaborated with Murray in this sense. Nise, again, she would say in her book, Shakespeare knew that the delirium has meaning. Polonius says about Hamlet's disorder, Hamlet, madness, yet there is method in it. It is a shame that science men rarely listen to poets. So we produced in 2014, we have been working since 2009 in the psychiatric hospital, and we produced many plays and all that, but we finally found method, energy, and strength to play Hamlet inside the psychiatric hospital, like Murray Cox did, and we found it out only after we started the experience. That's the importance of research. If you don't research, you'll never find. And then we played this wonderful experience, which was madness, yet there is method in it. Sociopolitical and cultural determination of Prince Hamlet's madness. Shakespeare at the psychiatric hospital. Scenopoetic spectacle workshop. And we had been working with theater in the Madness Hotel. Shakespeare is one of our patrons. Nise da Silveira is another one. And Dionysus, the god of theater and folly and madness, is the other. And we have been playing in the streets with a lot of people doing popular works, and we've been playing beautifully with great performances and pageants and works, and actually the patients that are considered to be severe or very complex psychiatric syndromes actually had the best evolutions as actors. The performances of the actors and the performance of we together had been a very important way to work. Let's have a look at this movie, this trailer that was produced.
A doença é dura, a doença é inflexível. Eu tenho visto atores elogiados e muito elogiados que não deveriam ser chamados de cristãos ou de pagãos, sequer de homens.
Vão pra igreja de tal forma que eu fico perguntando se não foram feitos e mal feitos por algum aprendiz da natureza.
Nós precisamos ter entrado no hospício para aprender a cooperar. Tomou! Tudo bem?
Eu entrei no meio deles e falei que eu também queria ser trapezista. Veio falar comigo a domadora do circo, que era uma moçona mesmo. Me olhou, riu um pouco, disse que era muito difícil, mas que nada era impossível.
Aí olha só, quando parar, para mesmo, gente. Não continua andando não. Se tá cantando e andando, para. Porque nós vamos parar agora e vamos falar alguma coisa.
Depois veio o Palácio Top, veio de Verlaine, que parecia o príncipe. As crianças do público, de repente apareceu uma luz lá no alto, todo mundo ficou olhando. A lona do circo havia sumido e o que eu via era estrela d'alva no céu aberto. Quando eu cansei de ficar olhando pro alto e fui olhar para as pessoas, só aí eu vi que estava sozinho.
Estes são os melhores atores do mundo!
So this was produced collaboratively by brilliant contributions of very young Brazilian filmmakers, and we have been blessed by this possibility of collaborate with my own people and work in this level of originality, and we've been able to produce such an original experience in such a precarious conditions that we work in the Brazilian public management. So BBC came to play, came to film us. They heard we were playing Hamlet, that there was a big piece in Aeon magazine, and the BBC reporter came and produced this document of this experience that I'm here presenting and showing to you.
It's nearly showtime, and these thespians are busy warming up ahead of tonight's performance of Hamlet. But these performers aren't professional actors. They are patients at a psychiatric hospital in Rio. Many of the members of this theatre group suffer from mental health conditions, including severe schizophrenia and chronic psychosis. Vitor Pordeus is the actor's doctor, but is also their director and acts alongside them in the plays. He founded a collective called the Madness Hotel. He believes that this collective provides a way for his patients to explore their emotions and feelings, and says his technique cures them.
I believe that theater cures because through the debate of the relationships of the person, we can see the evolution of the person. Mental illness is characterized by isolation. Theater heals because it expands the conscious, the emotion, the relationship to the other.
Vitor says that the success of his work can be clearly seen, and has many anecdotes about dramatic effects that theatre has had on his patients.
This patient was introduced to me as mute. When this patient was very severe, very regressed, very chronic psychosis, schizophrenia, long-term hospitalization, she enters in the workshop and she catches the microphone and she sings.
The troupe is on its way to the beach for a sunset performance in Ipanema. The group comes here regularly to perform. Hamlet is a favourite, as Vitor says it openly explores its character's state of mind.
Vitor says that he believes that theatre can have a curative effect on mental health problems, and the people here performing at this beautiful setting in Rio de Janeiro certainly seem to get a lot out of the experience. But Vitor does have his critics.
Although arts are commonly used as part of a patient's therapy, many caution that theatre cannot cure mental health conditions. Dr. Leonardo Palmeira says the arts can be beneficial, but as a complementary treatment.
When treating conditions such as schizophrenia, we have to accept that no single tool has been proven to cure mental health problems, not even drugs which have the most scientific support. The best results have come from a tailored mix of treatments. I think theatre and the arts have a role to play in a broad spectrum of therapies, but to say theatre is curative is an exaggeration.
To be or not to be.
Vitor believes the opposite is true, and that there is a severe over-reliance on drugs, which should be treated as a last resort. Controversially, he says this theatre therapy has allowed him to lower his patient's dosage. But despite the controversy, his workshops appear to have a real impact on many of his patients' lives.
I really like theatre. It helps open my mind. I still get my great days, like today I'm feeling a bit down, but I'm really trying. I feel I've grown as a person.
At a basic level, these performances allow patients stimulation and interaction they would otherwise not get. But Vitor is adamant his work heals and changes lives on a level that science doesn't yet understand. Ben Taverner, BBC World News, Rio de Janeiro.
And we made a synthesis of this experience with theater in the last 7 years with 7 authors. So we have casted 7 authors that we consider to make the proper debate and the proper understanding of the theater, of the methodical theater, of psychopathology, of understanding of the human psyche. And those are Shakespeare, Amir Haddad, Arthur here represented by Hermes Trismegistus, the alchemy god, Bertolt Brecht represented here by Galileo, Euripides represented here by Dionysius, Silveira, Nise da Silveira herself, and Baruch Spinoza himself. Those 7 authors, they propose a vision about what theater is, its origins, its relationship to the healing traditions, to the rituals, to the idea of a ritualistic theater, then the method of theater and the lecture of theater by Hamlet that proposes an efficient method for theater, then the theater of a scientific era, then the public art of Brazil, represented by Amir Haddad and the Living Ancestor, Júnior Santos, Rai Lima, and then Nise da Silveira, the healing idea, the method of healing, the emotion of coping, that's the name of the theory of Nise, the emotion of coping, the catalyzing affection, into theater, adapted to theater, and at last, the Spinozian vision of God as nature, the experience of totality, and we do that in 7 days. We have been doing this, and we'll keep doing this as a routine of formation of our actors in Brazil. We have here a short image of that. Ask the how, not what is. Theater is the vaccine against madness. To do theater is the vaccine against madness. And we did this acrostic for those 7 names. It is the 7th day in the Yiddish tradition, Shabbos. So it's the Saturday in Yiddish. And the last work we did this year, 2016, was The Dreams of Reason, Produce Monsters, God and Devil in Faust's Land, inspired in Goethe and Glauber. And we had been documented in pictures by the Danish photographer Stefan Stubager. And these are the cat, that's Faust and Mephistopheles in the front line. That's Jaci Oliveira, Pelezinho, playing brilliantly Mephistopheles, conducting Faust. That's Nilo Sergio, who produced a historical performance of Faust and the whole idea of a Faustian medicine, a Faustian. And here is a movie produced by the biggest Brazilian newspaper.
Quero que você, meu ferro, o leve.
A minha história na psiquiatria é muito longa. Ela começou nos anos 80, onde surgiu o rock and roll, e eu sou a exemplificação do que é a reforma psiquiátrica.
Como os outros falavam que eu era o caso perdido por Vitor, a Vitor, não, ela vai ter jeito, mesmo se não for na porrada, ela tem jeito. Aí eu parei de tomar remédio, já tem 4 anos já. Aí eu tenho minha autonomia, é muito legal como você tem a sua autonomia sem ter que depender de ninguém.
Você tem que assumir o comando pra aprender a ser cidadão. Você tem que assumir o comando pra aprender a ser cidadão. Você tem que assumir o comando pra aprender a...
Eu me sinto totalmente ressocializado. Agora, por exemplo, eu fui estudando a tragédia Fausto, do autor Goethe, do romantismo alemão, né? E fui me preparando. Eu tenho sido muito acariciado pelos companheiros que consideram meu trabalho importante, mas eu procuro desenvolver humildade, entende? Porque o Fausto é exatamente essa coisa. É a loucura.
I try to be humble because Faust is arrogant.
Eu estou ansioso.
I'm anxious. I need a diazepam.
Nós escolhemos a peça Fausto, né? Que o título que nós demos foi Deus
We
do
chose
Diabo
this
na Terra,
play
Fausto, que é uma peça escrita em 1806, né?
Written in
do autor alemão,
1806 by
e que
Goethe,
ele
the German.
trata na nossa leitura justamente a
treats
loucura. A peça
about
é sobre a
madness,
desmedida, sobre o
about
desequilíbrio do
the
médico
lack of
que
measure
estudou muito,
of a
tá velho,
physician,
cansado,
arrogant,
fica revoltado com
vain,
isso, né? Vaidoso, arrogante, ambicioso,
yeah,
e decide vender a alma ao diabo.
ambitious, and he wants to sell to the devil. And then he is tortured.
Já malucona mesmo, só pra comer. Eu
Miriam
comecei a
saying that
participar em 2012.
she started to participate in
continuei
2012.
participando no teatro. Aí eu tive alguns surtos, né? Aí eu ficava
Yes, and she had some
eu
crises.
não ver muita gente. Mas
Didn't
foi muito legal eu participar desse teatro.
tolerate
Gomes, né?
very
Uma paciente
collective
que é uma das
structures,
fases mais graves do Chico,
experiences.
que nós chamamos de mutismo seletivo, né?
De Marcinha Gomes,
A doença é tão grave que ela fica totalmente
severe
ausente, não se comunica.
psychosis
E ela tava
and
cantando lá.
selective
Viva
mute,
o carnaval!
and she sings in the workshop. She's singing.
O que é isso? Entende? Que
What's
paciente
that?
grave ame dançar.
Patients considered to be severe, they
Totalmente.
love
O
being
Idemilton fica
dancing
preso,
and
né?
singing.
Foge, né? Fica na grade ali.
Like Idemilton de Andrade that dances a lot, participates a lot,
E se relaciona.
communicates
Então
and
são
relates
pessoas
to
que
himself.
foram ao inferno e voltaram.
Eu
They
me
have
trato
gone to the hell and
nessa
returned.
doutrina baseada em doutora Nise da Silveira.
I treat myself with this doctrine about Dr. Nise da Silveira, Brecht, Amir Haddad, and Baruch
A
Spinoza.
abordagem psicossocial tem muito a ver com isso. Tem muito a ver com
Psychosocial
entender que o
approaches
ser humano é
have a lot to
todo,
do
que o
with
ser
that.
humano é integral, que o ser humano
Human
é do que é
beings are
inferior e que é
integral.
superior, do que está de um lado e que está de um outro. E todo o processo de cura passa
Every
pela
healing
experiência da totalidade.
process
Então o teatro
passes
é uma
through this
forma de
experience of
totalidade.
totality.
Tudo sim precisa de um não, como
Music.
a luz precisa de escuridão.
Toda sociedade precisa defender saúde mental.
Every
Esse é o
society,
direito de nós todos.
the whole of society must defend mental health, and that's a right of us all. Miriam Rodrigues. So this was the last production. We have a website for the People's University for Art and Science with the pedagogic principles that we developed and we confirmed in practice. And there is a blog, a collective blog that a lot of people can publish, and the people that are working in the territory, that are working, our collaborators, our actors, they are publishing it. And this is a map that is spreading in the world of this idea, of these principles, and we have a collaborative agenda that anyone can publish it, and we also have a novella, which is a cloud opera, like a soap opera, but a cloud opera in the web that works with many different actors, like Chico Cesar, a famous Brazilian singer that visited the Madness Hotel and worked with us. The things that are happening, all the cast. Now we have a big cast of people that have been working with us in the Madness Hotel, collaborators, artists, everybody working as actors here. I am doing this workshop in Montreal. Every Monday we receive people and we accept new people in the group to learn this method, to learn this experience, and have free actors training and develop their own experiences. So it is possible, it is confirmed, it is practical, it was developed as a public policy, and unfortunately May this year, the public health officer of Rio de Janeiro, the current officer, Dr. Sorans, has fired me from the coordination of the Madness Hotel, and that forced us to declare the death of the experience, since it is such a delicate work, it is such a complex work, that the photographer that had been named in my position certainly wouldn't have the necessary competencies to develop this experience and to develop this experience and to preserve this experience. He would blow it up It is psychiatry. It is not an easy task. It's not simple. We have a very complex cast of actors, and we decided to close the hotel, and we keep doing the work in the streets in Rio, in Montreal. We keep training people. I return regularly to Brazil to retrain, to recycle the actors, to maintain them in the state of performance, and we keep doing the work and resisting the attacks that we are receiving from this authoritarian government that has been ruling Brazil since May 2016. Thank you very much. Merci. Obrigado.